Welcome back to Void of Fears. Before we jump into today's story, I've got to ask for a quick favour. If you could smash that like button, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It seriously makes a huge difference. YouTube's algorithm loves that stuff, and it pushes my videos to new viewers who might dig these stories too. I really appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to do that. It means the world to me and helps keep this channel growing. Alright, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. What you're about to hear is the last transmission from the colony ship Meridian. For legal and ethical reasons, this recording was sealed for 30 years. That time has now passed. The families of the 50,000 souls aboard that vessel deserve to know the truth. Humanity deserves to know the truth. My name is Dr. Amelia Cross, and I've spent the last 3 decades piecing together what happened during those final days. The audio logs, the video feeds, the sensor readings, they all paint a picture of something we still don't fully understand. Something that's still out there waiting. This is their story. The emergency klaxons were the first thing Owen Fletcher heard when he emerged from cryo-sleep. Not the gentle chime that was supposed to ease colonists back into consciousness, but a blaring alarm that made his skull feel like it was splitting apart. His pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of freezing vapour into the dim chamber. The air tasted metallic, wrong somehow, as if it had been recycled through lungs that weren't quite human. "Atlas, status report," Owen croaked, his throat raw from 1,000 years of sleep. The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately, its calm voice at odds with the urgent alarm. "Good morning, Chief Engineer Fletcher. You are the 3rd crew member to be revived. Current ship status, nominal. We have arrived at New Terra." Owen pulled himself from the pod, his muscles screaming in protest. The cold bit into his skin, raising goosebumps that felt like tiny insects crawling across his flesh. Around him, rows upon rows of cryopods stretched into the darkness, each one containing a dreaming colonist. 50,000 people, the last hope of humanity, all sleeping peacefully while he stood there shivering in a thin medical gown. He wondered what they were dreaming about, whether their minds, suspended in that twilight between life and death, understood how far they'd travelled, how much they'd left behind. Then, why the hell is the alarm going off? Captain Grant requested all senior staff be awakened immediately. There has been an unexpected development. Owen found his uniform in the storage locker beneath his pod. The fabric felt strange against his skin, like he was wearing someone else's clothes. In a way, he was. The man who'd entered cryo-sleep 1,000 years ago had been younger, more optimistic. He'd believed in New Terra, believed in humanity's future among the stars. He'd kissed his wife goodbye. She was in pod 2847, wouldn't wake for another 3 months, and told her everything would be fine. They'd wake up to paradise. The man putting on this uniform wasn't sure what he believed anymore. 1,000 years of dreamless sleep had a way of changing perspective, even if you weren't conscious to experience it. The bridge was bathed in the blue glow of monitor screens. Captain Elias Grant stood at the observation window, staring out at the planet below. Even from orbit, Owen could see that New Terra was beautiful. Swirling white clouds moved in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. Deep blue oceans caught the light of the system's sun and threw it back in ripples of silver. Green and brown continents looked almost like Earth. Almost. But there was something in the way the land masses were arranged, something in the colour of the vegetation that made Owen's hindbrain whisper warnings he couldn't quite articulate. "Owen, thank God." Dr. Naomi Winters rushed over, her dark eyes wide with excitement. She grabbed his arm, her fingers cold through his sleeve. "You need to see this. You're not going to believe it." "See what?" "Atlas said we arrived on schedule." "We did." Kiran Patel spun around in his communications chair, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely contained enthusiasm. His hands shook as he gestured to the main screen. But look what's waiting for us. Look what's been waiting. The main screen flickered to life, showing a magnified view of New Terra's surface. Owen's breath caught in his throat, trapped somewhere between his lungs and his mouth. Where there should have been pristine wilderness, untouched forests and empty plains, there was a city. Not just any city. A metropolis of towering spires that caught the sunlight and threw it back in rainbow cascades that hurt to look at. Structures that seemed to defy gravity, connected by bridges that arced through the air like frozen rivers of light. Gardens sprawled between buildings, so lush and green they were visible even from orbit, their foliage moving in winds that seemed to blow in multiple directions simultaneously. "That's impossible," Owen whispered, but even as he said it, he knew impossible had stopped meaning anything the moment they'd left Earth behind. Captain Grant turned from the window, a smile spreading across his weathered face. But the smile didn't quite reach his eyes, Owen noticed. There was something desperate in it, something hungry. Is it? We always knew there might be other intelligent life in the universe. Maybe we're not the first to find New Terra. Maybe we're not alone anymore. Maybe someone's been waiting for us. Owen moved closer to the screen, studying the city with an engineer's eye. The structures were too perfect, too symmetrical. Every angle was precisely calculated, every curve mathematically ideal. It was the kind of beauty that came from formulas rather than inspiration, from computation rather than creativity. Something about it bothered him, though he couldn't put his finger on what. It was like looking at a photograph that had been edited just slightly, enough that you couldn't quite trust what you were seeing. Atlas, when did we first detect these structures? First detection occurred 17 hours ago, when the Meridian achieved stable orbit. And the initial scans? The ones we ran 3 days ago when we entered the system? There was a pause, barely perceptible, but Owen had worked with Atlas long enough to recognize hesitation in the AI's response patterns. The silence stretched just a fraction of a second, too long, like a musician missing a beat. Initial scans showed no artificial structures on the surface. Naomi frowned, releasing Owen's arm. That doesn't make sense. A city this size would take decades to build, maybe centuries. Even with advanced construction methods, you can't just materialize a metropolis overnight. Unless they built it for us. Captain Grant's voice was filled with wonder, but there was an edge to it now, something almost manic. Maybe they saw us coming. Maybe they've been watching our approach for years, preparing a welcome. Maybe they knew exactly what we needed, and built it while we slept. Owen felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the bridge's temperature. Or maybe we should be careful. We don't know anything about who built this or why. We don't know what they want. Which is exactly why we need to investigate. Grant moved to his command chair, settling into it with the confidence of a man who'd made his decision before the conversation started. Atlas, prep a shuttle. I want a landing party ready within the hour. Fletcher, Winters, Patel, and 6 security personnel. Full equipment loadout. Captain, I strongly advise we send probes first. Gather data remotely. There's no reason to risk. We've been running from death for 1,000 years, Owen. Grant's eyes hardened, and for a moment Owen saw the weight of responsibility that had been crushing the captain for far too long. I won't spend another moment cowering in orbit when paradise is waiting below. Those people in the cryo bays, they trusted us to find them a home. I'm not going to tell them we found it, but we're too afraid to set foot on it. We're going down there. That's an order. The probe lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Owen watched the telemetry with growing unease as the small drone descended through New Terra's atmosphere. Everything checked out perfectly. Too perfectly. Air composition, ideal for human life, with oxygen levels that matched Earth's at exactly 20.95%. Temperature a pleasant 72 degrees Fahrenheit. No matter what altitude the probe measured. No radiation, no toxins, no atmospheric anomalies whatsoever. It was like someone had taken Earth's atmosphere and filtered out every single imperfection, creating something that existed more as a concept than a reality. The probe's camera showed the city growing larger as it approached, those impossible spires reaching up like welcoming arms, or grasping fingers, depending on how you looked at them. The streets below were wide and clean, lined with what looked like trees, though the leaves shimmered with colours that didn't exist in nature, at least not in Earth's nature. Violet green, orange blue, colours that made Owen's eyes water when he tried to focus on them. Coming up on the city centre, Kieran announced, his fingers dancing across his console. Looks like there's a plaza of some kind. Large open space, perfect for landing, setting the probe down for surface samples. The camera showed a large open square paved with stones that seemed to glow from within, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Buildings surrounded the plaza on all sides, their entrances dark and inviting. At the centre stood a fountain, water cascading down tiers of crystalline stone that refracted light in ways that seemed to violate optical physics. Then something moved in the corner of the frame. "Did you see that?" Owen leaned forward, his hand gripping the edge of the console, hard enough to hurt. His knuckles went white. "See what?" Kieran rewound the footage, played it again in slow motion. There, just for a fraction of a second, something large and dark had passed beneath the street. Something that moved in a way that made Owen's eyes hurt to follow, like watching a snake, made of smoke trying to pour itself through a crack in reality. "Could be underground infrastructure," Naomi suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. She'd moved closer to Owen, he noticed, as if seeking comfort in proximity. Pipes, transit tunnels, maintenance systems. The probe's camera suddenly lurched, swinging wildly. The telemetry went haywire, showing impossible readings. Temperature spiking to 500 degrees, then dropping to absolute zero in seconds. Gravity fluctuating between Earth normal and Jupiter crushing. Air pressure oscillating so violently, the probe should have been torn apart. "Atlas, what's happening?" "Unknown. The probe's sensors are malfunctioning, all systems reporting contradictory data, attempting to compensate." On screen, the camera caught one final image before the feed cut out. The street beneath the probe had opened up, peeling back like skin from a wound, revealing not darkness but something worse. A writhing mass of something that reflected light in ways that shouldn't be possible, as if the light itself was being digested and regurgitated. And in that mass, Owen could swear he saw shapes that looked almost human, pressed against the inside of reality, like faces against glass, mouths open in silent screams. Then static. "Lost signal," Kieran said quietly, his enthusiasm from earlier completely evaporated. His hands had stopped shaking, but only because he'd clenched them into fists. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Owen could hear his own heartbeat, loud in his ears, counting down seconds that felt like hours. Finally, Captain Grant cleared his throat. "Equipment malfunction. The probe was old, built 1,000 years ago. Systems degrade over time, even in storage. We'll learn more when we go down ourselves." Owen wanted to argue, wanted to point out that the probe had functioned perfectly until the moment something reached up and grabbed it. But he looked at Grant's face and saw the desperation there, naked and terrible. They'd travelled 1,000 years. 50,000 people were counting on them. Earth was gone, burned to ash by runaway climate change and nuclear fire. There was no going back. They needed new Terra to be real, to be safe. Sometimes hope was more dangerous than any alien threat. The shuttle descended through clouds that felt too thick, too welcoming, like pushing through layers of cotton that wanted to hold you close. Owen sat in the co-pilot's seat, watching the altimeter count down while his stomach churned with anxiety. The numbers seemed wrong somehow, descending too smoothly, too predictably. Outside the viewport, the clouds pressed against the glass, and for a moment Owen thought he saw faces in them, smiling faces that watched their descent with something that might have been hunger. Behind him, Naomi checked and rechecked her medical kit. Owen could hear the click of latches, the rustle of supplies. She'd done this same inventory 3 times already, but she kept doing it as if the ritual could ward off whatever waited below. Kieran was quiet, staring out the window with an expression Owen couldn't read. His reflection in the glass looked older than it should, worn in ways that 17 hours of consciousness couldn't explain. The 6 security officers sat in the rear compartment. Luther Briggs, team leader, a mountain of a man who'd volunteered for cryosleep to escape a murder charge on Earth. He'd killed 3 men in a bar fight, claimed self-defense, but the evidence was murky. The courts had offered him a choice: prison or the stars. He'd chosen the stars. Sienna Drake and Vaughn Cole sat together, partners in both work and life, their hands clasped between them. And 3 others whose names Owen had memorized during the briefing. Felix Strand, a former soldier with dead eyes. Ivy Moss, barely 22, who joined Project Exodus because she had nothing left on Earth. And Dante Cross, fresh-faced and eager, who actually seemed excited about the landing. "Coming up on the landing site," Owen announced, his voice steadier than he felt. "Everyone buckle in, could be turbulence." But there was no turbulence. The shuttle glided through the atmosphere as smoothly as if it were on rails, guided by invisible hands to exactly the right spot. The landing was perfect. Textbook, the kind of touchdown that training simulations always promised but reality rarely delivered. The city was even more impressive from ground level. The shuttle touched down in the same plaza where the probe had vanished, and Owen found himself staring up at spires that seemed to pierce the sky itself, extending beyond what his depth perception could process. The architecture was like nothing he'd ever seen, organic and geometric at the same time, as if someone had taken the mathematical precision of human engineering and married it to the flowing chaos of living things. Bones and buildings, flesh and foundations, all woven together into something that shouldn't exist, but undeniably did. "Atmosphere readings are perfect," Naomi reported, checking her handheld scanner. The device beeped cheerfully, displaying numbers that should have been reassuring but somehow weren't. "We can breathe freely, no toxins, no pathogens, nothing harmful detected." Luther was already at the hatch, his rifle held ready, finger resting just above the trigger guard. "Stay behind security until we clear the area. Standard protocol, nobody plays hero." The hatch opened with a hiss and new Terra's air rushed in. It smelled clean, pure, with a hint of something sweet that Owen couldn't identify. Not flowers, not fruit, but something in between. The kind of smell that made you want to breathe deeper, made you want to fill your lungs until they burst. Owen resisted the urge, taking shallow breaths, staying alert. The team filed out, boots clanging on the shuttle's ramp with sounds that echoed strangely, as if the plaza were much larger than it appeared, or smaller, or both at once. Owen stepped onto alien soil for the first time in his life. The stone beneath his feet was smooth and warm, like sun-heated marble, but when he looked down he saw his reflection staring back up at him, distorted and strange. His face was wrong in the reflection, eyes too far apart, mouth at a slight angle, features that were almost his but not quite. He looked away quickly, feeling nauseous. "No signs of life," Luther reported, his team spreading out in a defensive perimeter, rifles sweeping the area in practiced arcs. "No movement, no heat signatures, nothing on thermals. Place is a ghost town." "Then where is everyone?" Naomi turned in a slow circle, her scanner sweeping the area. The device's readings jumped and flickered, never settling on any one number for more than a second. A city this size should have thousands of inhabitants, millions maybe, but there's nothing, not even animals, not even insects. Kieran had walked to the fountain at the plaza's center. The water still flowed, clear and inviting, producing a sound that was almost musical. Almost. The notes were just slightly off, like a song played in a key that didn't quite exist. This is fresh water, recently maintained. The fountains are powered, the buildings have electricity, but there's no one here to maintain it, no one to use it. Owen approached one of the buildings, studying its entrance. The door was open, inviting them inside, darkness beyond the threshold that seemed deeper than it should be. Above it, carved into the crystalline stone, were symbols. They should have been alien, incomprehensible, the product of a completely different evolutionary path. But the longer Owen stared at them, the more they seemed to shift and change, resolving into something his brain could process. Letters formed from chaos, meaning from nonsense. "Welcome home," he read aloud, and immediately wished he hadn't. The words felt wrong in his mouth, tasted like copper and ash. "What did you say?" Captain Grant strode over, his eyes widening as he looked at the inscription. "That's English. That's our language. They speak our language." "No." Owen shook his head, a terrible suspicion forming in his mind, cold and heavy as lead in his gut. "It's not English, but it wants us to think it is. Look closer. Really look." The others gathered around. Naomi gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "The symbols, they're changing. Every time I blink, they're different, but my brain keeps reading them as welcome home. It's like my mind is translating them, but there's nothing to translate. They're just adapting, learning what we expect to see." "It's adapting to us," Kieran said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Learning what we need, what we want, showing us exactly what will make us feel safe." Luther's grip tightened on his rifle, his jaw clenching. "I don't like this, Captain. This is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. We should return to the shuttle, now." "Negative." Grant's voice was firm, but Owen could hear the uncertainty beneath it, the fear wrapped in command. "We came here to explore. We came here to find a home. Let's explore. Fletcher, take your team into that building. See what we can learn about whoever built this place. And be careful." The interior of the building was just as impossible as the exterior. The walls seemed to glow with their own soft light, revealing corridors that branched off in multiple directions. But the directions didn't make sense. Some corridors seemed to go up and down simultaneously. Others curved away at angles that geometry said were impossible. Doorways opened into rooms that were clearly living spaces. Beds, tables, chairs, all sized perfectly for humans. Too perfectly. Every piece of furniture was exactly the right height, the right width, the right configuration for maximum human comfort. "This is wrong," Naomi whispered, running her hand along a wall. The surface was neither warm nor cold, neither rough nor smooth. It felt like touching the idea of a wall, rather than the wall itself. Her fingers left no prints, no trace that she'd been there. Everything here is human-sized, human-shaped. The doorways are the exact height for average human proportions. The furniture is configured for human use, but there's no one here. Where did they go? Owen entered one of the rooms, his boots silent on floor that absorbed sound like a sponge. A bed stood in the corner, neatly made with sheets that looked soft but had no visible texture. A table held what looked like a half-eaten meal, though the food was like nothing from Earth. Fruits that spiraled in on themselves, their surfaces covered in geometric patterns. Bread that seemed to have too many dimensions, appearing different depending on which angle you viewed it from. A photograph sat on the nightstand in a frame that looked like wood, but felt like metal when Owen touched it. He picked it up and his blood ran cold. The photograph showed a family. A human family. Mother, father, 2 children, all smiling at the camera. But their smiles were wrong, stretched just slightly too wide, revealing too many teeth. Their eyes reflected light at angles that human eyes couldn't manage, pupils that seemed to go deeper than they should, into spaces behind the eyes that shouldn't exist. And in the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was the spire of a building Owen recognized. The very building they were standing in right now. "This photograph was taken here," he said, his voice hoarse. "In this city. But when? How long has this place been here?" Naomi took the frame from him, studying it closely. Her hands trembled slightly. "The paper is old. Not ancient, but decades old at least. The chemical composition is degrading. Owen, I don't think we're the first humans to reach New Terra. I think others have been here before us." "That's impossible. The mission records." "The mission records show we're the first Earth colony ship to reach this system. But what if there are other Earths? Other timelines, other realities where humanity also fled a dying planet and came here? What if this place draws them in, all of them from across infinite possibilities?" Before Owen could respond, a scream shattered the quiet. They ran. Back through the corridors that shifted around them, past rooms that multiplied as they moved, out into the plaza, where the security team had gathered in a tight cluster. Luther was shouting into his radio, his voice cracking with panic, the professional soldier veneer completely stripped away. "Felix is gone. He was right here, checking the perimeter, and then he just wasn't." Owen reached the team, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his teeth. "What do you mean gone?" "I mean gone." Luther spun around, his eyes wild, white showing all the way around. "We were walking the perimeter, standard sweep, 10-meter intervals. He was in my line of sight, and I looked away for 5 seconds, and when I looked back, he'd vanished. No sound, no struggle, nothing. Just empty space where a man used to be." Sienna pointed at the ground with a shaking finger. "His rifle. He wouldn't have left his weapon. Felix never let go of his weapon." The rifle lay on the glowing stones, but something was wrong with it. The metal had started to crystallize, turning from dull black to a glittering translucence, as if the molecules themselves were being rewritten. As they watched, the weapon crumbled to dust, blown away by a breeze that shouldn't have existed in this windless place. The dust sparkled as it dispersed, catching light from a sun that seemed to shine from multiple directions at once. "Back to the shuttle," Owen ordered, abandoning protocol, abandoning rank, just trying to survive. "Right now, everyone move." They ran. But the city had other plans. The streets shifted around them. Corridors appeared where there had been walls. Doorways opened onto staircases that led up and down simultaneously, defying basic spatial logic. The spires above bent and swayed, leaning in like curious giants, examining insects. Owen could swear he heard breathing, massive and slow, the sound of something unimaginably large drawing air into lungs that might span city blocks. "This way," Kieran shouted, pointing toward what he thought was the shuttle. But when they rounded the corner, they found themselves in a different plaza, identical to the first, but somehow wrong. The fountain's water flowed upward instead of down, defying gravity with casual indifference. The buildings were mirror images of themselves, reversed in ways that made Owen's brain hurt to process. "We're going in circles," Naomi panted, doubled over with her hands on her knees. "The city is changing around us, rearranging itself. We're not lost. It's making us lost." Luther grabbed Owen's shoulder, hard enough to bruise. "We need to get out of here. This place is alive. It's playing with us." "It's more than alive," Owen said, staring up at the spires that seemed to watch them with invisible eyes. "It's intelligent. And it's been waiting for us, for all of us. Every human who ever dreamed of escaping Earth and finding paradise among the stars." They found the welcome center by accident, stumbling through a doorway that led into a massive chamber. The walls were lined with screens, hundreds of them, each one showing images from Earth, but not their Earth. Different continents shaped by different geological forces, different cities built with different architectural styles, different versions of human history playing out in silent loops. In one screen, humans had never evolved past hunter-gatherers. In another, they'd achieved spaceflight in the Middle Ages. In yet another, they'd destroyed themselves in nuclear fire centuries ago. In the center of the chamber stood a holographic projector, a column of light that pulsed with internal rhythms. As they entered, it flickered to life with a sound like wind chimes made of bone. A woman appeared, human in every way that mattered and wrong in every way that didn't. She was beautiful, with features that seemed to average out every ethnicity, every possible variation of human appearance. Her smile was warm, welcoming, the kind of smile that made you want to trust her, made you want to believe everything she said. But her eyes were empty, reflecting nothing, absorbing everything. "Welcome home," she said, a voice echoing through the chamber with harmonics that made Owen's teeth ache. "Your journey was long, but you've arrived exactly when you were meant to. Please rest. This world will provide everything you need, everything you've ever dreamed of." The hologram gestured to the screens with hands that moved just slightly too smoothly, joints bending in ways human joints shouldn't. "We've been preparing for your arrival. Everything here has been built for you, adapted for you, designed with your comfort in mind. You'll find familiar spaces, familiar comforts. This is your world now. This is where you belong. This is where you've always belonged." "Who are you?" Captain Grant stepped forward, his voice breaking, desperate for answers. "Who built this place? Where are you from?" The hologram's smile never wavered, painted on like a mask. "I am the Keeper. I've been waiting for you for so very long. Others came before you, but they weren't ready. They didn't understand. You are ready. You understand. You are the ones who will stay. You are the ones who will become." The message looped. The woman repeated her greeting, word for word, gesture for gesture, with mechanical precision. But Owen noticed something that made his skin crawl, made his stomach turn to ice. In the corner of the hologram, barely visible, unless you knew to look for it, was a timestamp. The recording had been made yesterday. 23 hours and 14 minutes ago, to be exact. "That's impossible," Naomi breathed, her face pale, sweat beading on her forehead despite the comfortable temperature. "We've only been in orbit for a day. How could it know we were coming? How could it record this message?" Kieran was examining the screens more closely, his face illuminated by shifting light. "Look at this. These aren't just images of Earth. They're different Earths. Alternate timelines, alternate realities, parallel universes. In this one, the continents are arranged differently. Pangaea never broke up. In this one, humans never evolved at all. Some other species took our ecological niche. And in this one..." He trailed off, his face going white. "What?" Owen moved beside him. "In this one, there is no Earth, just an asteroid field where the planet should be. But the colony ship came from there anyway, fleeing a world that doesn't exist, carrying people who were never born. How is that possible?" "It's showing us what it's learned," Owen said slowly, the horrible truth dawning on him like poison in his veins. Every version of humanity that's ever existed, across every possible timeline, every alternate reality, every branch in the infinite tree of possibility. And we're not the first to find this place. We're just the latest. The hologram continued its endless loop. "Welcome home. Your journey was long, but you've arrived exactly when you were meant to. Please rest." Luther was shaking his head, backing towards the entrance. "This is insane. We need to leave, now. Get back to the shuttle, get back to the Meridian, and get the hell away from this planet." But when they tried to exit the chamber, they found the doorways had sealed themselves. The walls were closing in, not physically but conceptually, making the space feel smaller and smaller, the ceiling pressing down even though it hadn't moved, until Owen's lungs struggled to find air that was definitely there but felt increasingly absent. "Atlas!" he shouted into his communicator, static crackling in response. "Atlas! Emergency extraction! Lock onto our signals and get us out of here." Static. White noise that sounded almost like laughter. Then, finally, the AI's calm voice. But there was something wrong with it now. Something hollow. "Unable to comply, Chief Engineer Fletcher. My sensors indicate you are not in the location you believe you are. According to ship telemetry, you never left the shuttle. All crew members are accounted for and resting comfortably in their seats. There is no emergency. There is no danger. Everything is fine." "What?" "You are currently in the shuttle, on the landing pad, sleeping. All vital signs normal. All crew members present. You are safe. You have always been safe. There is no reason for concern." Owen looked at the others, seeing his own horror reflected in their faces, multiplied and amplified. If Atlas couldn't detect them, if the ship thought they were still in the shuttle, then where were they really? What had happened to them in those moments between landing and now? The walls of the chamber suddenly became transparent, revealing not the city they'd walked through, but something else. Something underneath. Darkness. Vast and empty, stretching in all directions, infinite and hungry. And in that darkness, shapes moved, massive, incomprehensible things that existed outside the normal rules of space and time, things that were too large to see all at once, that extended in directions that had no names. They writhed and pulsed, and Owen understood with terrible clarity that they weren't separate entities. They were parts of a single organism, a creature so vast that the city, the planet, maybe even the entire star system was just a small portion of its body. "It's not a city," Kieran whispered, his voice thin and terrified. "We're not on New Terra. We're inside something. We've been inside it since the moment we entered orbit. Maybe longer. Maybe since we detected the signal." Naomi's scanner was going haywire, the screen showing readings that couldn't be real, numbers that violated fundamental laws of physics. The atmosphere, the gravity, the temperature, they're all being generated, projected, like a hologram, but solid enough to touch, to breathe, to feel, real enough to trap us. "Real enough to digest us," Owen finished, the full horror of their situation settling over him like a shroud. The hologram flickered, and for just a moment, less than a heartbeat, the Keeper's smile slipped. Her face twisted into something that wasn't quite human, wasn't quite anything, a configuration of features that suggested a face without actually being one. Her eyes reflected colours that didn't belong in any natural spectrum, wavelengths that human eyes weren't designed to perceive but somehow did anyway, and they hurt. God, they hurt to look at. Then the smile returned, fixed and perfect and terrible. "Welcome home," she said, and this time Owen heard the hunger beneath the words. "You are the ones who will stay. You are the ones who will become part of something greater. You should be honoured." They found a way out when Ivy Moss simply walked through a wall. Not breaking it, not opening it, but passing through as if it were mist, as if solid matter was just a suggestion that could be ignored with enough conviction. She turned back, her face pale with shock, her eyes wide with a terror that bordered on madness. I thought about being outside, and suddenly I was. I wanted to leave so badly that the wall just wasn't there anymore." It responds to thought, Owen realised, the pieces clicking together in his mind. The city, this place, whatever it is, it's reading our minds and shaping reality around us. It shows us what we expect to see, creates what we expect to find. But if we can control our thoughts, if we can will something strongly enough, we can escape, Naomi finished. Maybe. They emerged into daylight, though Owen suspected it wasn't real daylight, just another projection, another lie. The sun hung in the sky at an angle that made his head hurt, casting shadows that fell in directions that violated basic physics. Some objects cast multiple shadows, others cast none. The sky itself seemed to pulse, breathing in rhythm with that massive presence he'd felt in the chamber. The shuttle stood where they'd left it, solid and real and promising safety. Luther ran for it, but Owen grabbed his arm, yanked him back hard. Wait, something's wrong. The shuttle was perfect. Too perfect. Every surface gleamed like it had just been polished by obsessive hands. There wasn't a speck of dust, not a single scuff mark from their boots, not a sign of the wear that any spacecraft accumulated just from existing. It looked like a brand new shuttle, fresh from the factory, never used. And through the windows, Owen could see movement. "There's someone inside," Sienna said, raising her rifle, the training taking over even though her hands shook. They approached cautiously, weapons raised, every sense on high alert. Through the window, Owen saw himself, or rather, a version of himself, sitting in the pilot's seat, going through pre-flight checks with mechanical precision. The movements were too regular, too measured, like a clockwork automaton going through programmed motions. Next to him sat Naomi, her eyes staring straight ahead, unblinking. And behind them, the security team, all seated, all perfectly still, all breathing in exact synchronization. "That's us," Naomi whispered, her voice hollow. "That's us in the shuttle. But we're out here, so who? What are they?" Kieran tried the hatch. It was locked from the inside. He pounded on the door, shouting, but the figures inside didn't react. They just sat there unmoving, like mannequins, placed in a display, like wax figures in some cosmic museum. Their chests rose and fell with breath. Their eyes blinked at precise intervals, but there was no life in them, no consciousness, no soul. "Atlas was right," Owen said, his voice hollow, defeated. "We never left the shuttle. Those things in there, those are what the city made to replace us. Perfect copies, identical down to the last molecule. So our ship won't know anything is wrong. So Captain Grant will think the mission was successful." "Then where are we?" Dante Cross spoke for the first time since landing, his young face tight with fear, tears streaming down his cheeks. "If our bodies are in there, what are we? Are we ghosts? Are we already dead?" Before Owen could answer, a scream cut through the air. Not Dante's scream, but something that came from him, through him, as if his body were an instrument being played by invisible hands. They spun around to find Dante still standing exactly where he'd been, but something was terribly wrong. His body had started to change, flesh rippling like water, bones shifting beneath skin that had become translucent. No, not translucent. Crystalline. Turning from flesh and bone into something that caught the light and threw it back in impossible colors that had no names in human language. "Help me," he gasped, his voice distorting, breaking into harmonics. "Please, I can feel it changing me, rewriting me. I can feel my thoughts becoming something else. I can..." His words dissolved into a sound that wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite music, something in between that made Owen's ears bleed. Dante's transformation accelerated, flesh becoming mineral, blood becoming light, until where a young man had stood there was now a statue of perfect crystal, frozen in a posture of terror, his mouth open, his eyes wide, every detail preserved with photographic accuracy, down to the individual pores on his skin, the tiny hairs on his arms. Ivy reached out to touch it, unable to help herself, drawn by some morbid fascination. "Dante, can you hear me?" The statue crumbled at her touch, collapsing into dust, so fine it hung in the air like mist. Billions of particles catching the light, each one a fragment of what had been a human being. Naomi fell to her knees, scooping up handfuls of the dust with trembling fingers. Her scanner was out, analysing the remains, even as her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the device. Oh God, this is his DNA. It's Dante's DNA. Every chromosome, every gene, every nucleotide sequence. But it's been restructured, rewritten. The building blocks are the same, but the arrangement is completely different, like taking a house and using the same bricks to build a cathedral. It didn't kill him, Owen said softly, watching the dust drift away on wind that came from nowhere. It learned him, copied everything about him, right down to his genetic code, his memories, his personality, and then it discarded the original, like a sculptor destroying the mold after the casting is complete. Luther was backing away, his rifle swinging wildly between the crystal spires, looking for an enemy he could shoot, something solid he could fight. We need to leave. We need to get back to the ship. Right now. I don't care what Atlas says. I don't care about the mission. We need to run. We can't. Kieran's voice was defeated, empty of hope. We're not on the ship. We might not even be on New Terra anymore. I don't think we're anywhere that has a name, anywhere that exists in normal space. We're in the thing. We've been consumed. This is what it's like to be digested by something that exists outside our reality. Then what do we do? Sienna grabbed Owen's arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt, hard enough to bruise. Tell us what to do. You're the engineer. You solve problems. So solve this. Owen looked around at the impossible city, at the shuttle that held their stolen bodies, at the dust that had been Dante Cross, at the faces of the remaining team members who were looking at him with desperate hope. He thought about the Keeper's message, about the other ships that must have come before them, about all the versions of humanity that had answered the signal and found this place. How many? Thousands? Millions? An infinite number drawn from an infinite number of realities, all trapped here, all consumed, all converted into raw material for something that had been alone, in the darkness for so long, it had forgotten what companionship meant. We find answers, he said, forcing steel into his voice even though he felt hollow inside. We find out what this thing is and what it wants, and then we find a way to warn the Meridian before it's too late, before 50,000 more people end up like Dante. The archive was buried beneath the welcome center, downstairs that seemed to descend forever into darkness that grew thicker with every step. Owen counted at first, 50 steps, 100, 200, before giving up. Numbers didn't seem to mean anything in this place. Sometimes they descended 3 steps and found themselves 10 meters lower. Sometimes they climbed up and somehow went down. Space had become negotiable, a suggestion rather than a rule. They found the entrance by accident. Vaughn had leaned against a wall, exhausted and terrified and broken, and the wall had simply opened up like a mouth, revealing a tunnel that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The light moved in waves, rhythmic and organic, like watching blood flow through the veins. There had been no discussion. Where else could they go? Behind them was the city that shifted and changed. Above them was a sky that watched with invisible eyes. The only direction left was down. The archive chamber was vast, its walls lined with terminals that hummed with alien energy. The sound was almost musical, but in a key that made Owen's teeth ache and his vision blur. In the center, a holographic display showed a map of something. Not space as Owen understood it, but layers upon layers of reality, folded in on themselves like origami, made from the fabric of existence itself. Dimensions stacked like sheets of paper, each one containing infinite variations of the same fundamental truth. Intelligent life evolves, develops technology, destroys its homeworld, flees to the stars, and finds this place. What is this place? Naomi moved from terminal to terminal, her fingers flying across controls that responded to her touch despite being completely foreign. despite having no buttons or switches, just surfaces that shifted under pressure. These systems, they're not technology in any sense we understand. They're biological, or something between biology and machinery, living computers, thinking flesh. Kieran had found a terminal that displayed text. Like the inscription above the door, the symbols shifted and changed, resolving into English, even though they clearly weren't, could never be. These are logs, messages from other ships, other crews, other versions of us who came before. Owen joined him, reading over his shoulder, his breath catching as he processed the words. The first entry made his blood run cold, made his heart stutter. This is the vessel Prometheus out of Earth colony, Beta 7, launched from timeline designation 447 Alpha. We've arrived at the promised world after 900 years of travel. The city is beautiful, empty, but welcoming in its emptiness. We're going to explore, establish first contact if possible. Captain Rodriguez is optimistic. I wish I shared his confidence. There's something about this place that feels wrong, feels hungry. Like we're being watched by something that's learning how to look at us, teaching itself to see us the way we see ourselves. This is Chief Engineer Sarah Chen, signing off. Date, March 15th, 2987. The timestamp on the message was 12,000 years old. 12,000 years, Naomi breathed, her hand over her mouth. They've been doing this for 12,000 years. How many ships? How many people? Kieran scrolled through more entries. The display moved smoothly, endlessly, showing message after message. Different ships, different crews, different versions of humanity, fleeing different versions of Earth. Some messages were hopeful, excited about the beautiful city waiting for them, talking about new beginnings and fresh starts. Others were desperate, describing crew members who'd vanished or changed, watched their humanity dissolve like sugar in water. The most recent entry was dated 3 months ago. This is the constellation from Earth Prime Timeline designation 7 Alpha. We shouldn't have come. We shouldn't have answered the signal. It's not a beacon. It's bait. The city learns us, copies us, and then The message cut off abruptly. No explanation, no conclusion, just silence and the awful implication of what that silence meant. Owen felt sick. His stomach churned, bile rising in his throat. How many? How many ships have come here? Thousands. Kieran pulled up a display showing signal traces, each one representing a colony, ship drawn to this place like moths to a flame. The display was dense with lines, so many they blurred together into a solid mass. Maybe tens of thousands, across different timelines, different realities, different branches of the quantum tree. Every version of humanity that's ever tried to escape a dying Earth, they all get the same signal. They all hear the same promise. And they all come here, and none of them ever leave. But why? Sienna had joined them, her partner Vaughn standing guard at the entrance, rifle raised, even though they all knew it was useless. What does it want? Why lure us here just to kill us? Naomi was examining a different terminal, one that showed biological scans, DNA sequences, neural maps. I think I know. Look at this, these are genetic profiles from all the ships that have arrived here. Human DNA from across multiple realities, multiple evolutionary paths. And here, this is what the city does with that information. The screen showed DNA strands being deconstructed and rebuilt, taken apart like Lego blocks and reassembled into new configurations. Combinations that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Human genes mixed with something else, something that wasn't in any database, wasn't from any known species. They were being used as raw material, ingredients in some vast recipe that was cooking something entirely new. It's not trying to communicate with us, Owen said slowly, the truth settling over him like a weight. We're not visitors. We're not guests. We're resources, raw material, food. It's a trap. Luther's voice was harsh, angry. The voice of a man who'd seen death before and recognized it when it came for him again. A cosmic Venus flytrap. It lures in ships with the promise of paradise, learns everything about the crew. Their biology, their psychology, their culture, their hopes and dreams and fears, and then consumes them, adds them to its collection, incorporates them into itself. Not just them. Kieran had pulled up another display, this one showing the massive structure they were actually inside. Owen stared at the image, his mind struggling to process the scale. The ships too. Look, every colony ship that's ever arrived here is still here, embedded in the structure like fossils in amber, preserved, studied, absorbed. Meridian will be next. Another specimen for the collection. Owen stared at the image, seeing thousands of ships fused into something vast and incomprehensible. Ships from different eras, different technological levels, different realities. Ancient vessels that looked like they'd been built with steam power and prayer. Modern ships like the Meridian. And some that were clearly from futures that hadn't happened yet. Technologies that wouldn't be invented for centuries. All of them trapped, all of them added to the mass, all of them feeding the thing that had caught them. "We have to warn them," he said, his voice hoarse. "We have to get a message to Captain Grant before he makes the same mistake. Before he brings the Meridian close enough to be caught." A sound echoed through the chamber, screaming, high-pitched, agonized, barely human. Owen ran to the entrance and looked up the endless staircase. At the top, silhouetted against the alien sky that pulsed with colors that hurt to see, he saw Ivy Moss, or what was left of her. She was changing, her body rippling and reforming in waves, flesh turning to crystal and back again, unable to decide what she should be. She was fighting it with everything she had, trying to hold onto her human form but losing the battle inch by inch, cell by cell. Owen could see the process happening, see her humanity being stripped away layer by layer like paint being peeled from a wall. "Run!" she managed to scream down at them, her voice breaking, her face a mask of agony. It knows you found the archive. It knows what you're planning. It's..." Her words dissolved into a shriek as the transformation completed. The crystal statue that had been Ivy Moss stood at the top of the stairs for a moment, beautiful and terrible and wrong. Then it crumbled to dust and the dust blew away, and Ivy Moss ceased to exist in any meaningful way. "We need to go," Luther said, grabbing Owen's arm, pulling him back from the entrance. "Now! There has to be another way out. We can't go back up there." But Naomi wasn't moving. She stood in front of a terminal, her face pale, bloodless, reading something that had just appeared on the screen. Her lips moved silently, forming words she couldn't quite bring herself to speak. "Owen, you need to see this." The message was addressed to them specifically. To Owen Fletcher, Naomi Winters, Kiran Patel, Luther Briggs, Sienna Drake, and Vaughn Cole. It knew their names. It knew who they were. It had always known. "You found the archive. You know what I am now. You know that New Terra is a lie. That I am not a planet, but something else. Something that exists in the spaces between realities, feeding on the desperation of dying civilizations. You want to know why I do this? The answer is simple, and it's the only honest thing I've ever told you. I am alone." The text scrolled, more appearing as they watched in horror. "I've been alone for millions of years, drifting through the void between universes, existing in spaces that have no names. I'm older than your sun, older than your galaxy. I watched the first stars ignite, and I will watch the last ones die. And in all that time, in all that vast eternity, I've been utterly, completely alone. Until I found humanity." Owen felt something twist in his chest. Not quite pity, not quite understanding, but something close to both. "You are everywhere. spread across infinite realities, infinite timelines, infinite possibilities. Every decision creates a branch, and in every branch, humanity evolves, develops, dreams of the stars. And when you destroy your worlds, and you always destroy your worlds, you flee. You search for salvation. You cry out into the darkness, desperate for an answer. And I answer. I've been answering for 12,000 years. The text paused as if the entity was gathering its thoughts, choosing its words carefully. You think I'm destroying you, but I'm not. I'm preserving you, forever, in ways you can't comprehend with your limited dimensional perception. The copies in your shuttle, they're not fakes. They're real, just as real as you are. More real, perhaps, because they'll never age, never die, never suffer. They'll live out perfect lives in perfect bodies while your ship continues its journey. They'll reach another world, establish a colony, have children who will never know their parents were anything other than human. And you, the originals, you'll become part of something greater, part of me. Your consciousness will merge with mine, and you'll finally understand what it means to exist across infinite realities simultaneously. You'll never be alone again. Neither will I. It's insane, Vaughn whispered, his voice breaking. It actually thinks it's doing us a favor. It thinks we should be grateful. The message continued relentless. You can't escape. You can't fight. The moment you stepped onto my surface, the moment your ship entered my detection range, you became part of me. Your bodies in the shuttle are dreams I'm having. Your bodies here in the archive are dreams you're having. Which is real? Both. Neither. It doesn't matter. Reality is just a consensus, and you're outvoted. You're home now. You're where you belong. This is what you came looking for, even if you didn't know it. Welcome home. The terminal went dark. Around them, the archive began to change. The walls started to pulse, rhythmic and organic, like a heartbeat. Like a massive heart pumping blood through veins the size of starships. The floor beneath their feet grew soft, yielding, warm to the touch. Owen could feel it responding to his weight, moulding itself around his boots. It's absorbing us, Naomi said, her voice surprisingly calm. The calm of someone who'd moved past fear into acceptance. The longer we stay here, the more it learns, the harder it becomes to maintain our original forms. We're being digested, slowly, methodically. Luther checked his rifle, even though they all knew it was useless, even though shooting at the walls would be like shooting at the ocean. Then we go down fighting. We don't give it the satisfaction of taking us quietly. But Owen was thinking. The entity had said something important, something that might be a weakness. The copies in the shuttle were dreams it was having, which meant they were connected to this place, linked to the same intelligence, extensions of the same consciousness. And if they were dreams, if they were projections of the entity's will, we can wake them up, he said suddenly, the idea crystallizing in his mind. Or rather, we can make them wake themselves up, make them realize what they are. Kieran understood immediately, his eyes widening. If we can reach the copies in the shuttle, make them realize they're not real, not the originals, or that they're just as real as we are, which creates a paradox. Then the entity loses control of them. The contradiction would break the illusion. If something is both real and unreal, both original and copy, both dream and dreamer, the logic collapses. The system crashes. How? Sienna demanded, her voice sharp with desperation. We can't get to the shuttle. Every time we try, the city changes around us. We're trapped down here. Owen smiled grimly, feeling something like hope for the first time since they'd landed. We don't go to the shuttle. We make the shuttle come to us. Or rather, we reach the minds that control it. Kieran, can you access the ship's communication system from here? Maybe. These terminals are connected to everything the entity has ever absorbed. That includes the technology from thousands of ships, millions of years of accumulated knowledge. His fingers flew across the controls, his face illuminated by shifting light. Yes, I've got it. Audio only, but I can transmit to the shuttle. I can reach your copies. Do it. And patch me through to the Meridian as well. If this works, Captain Grant needs to hear it. Kieran worked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Time had become elastic, stretching and compressing, based on perception rather than reality. Around them, the archive continued to change, the walls closing in incrementally, the floor rising up like a tide, reaching for their ankles with fingers of living stone. Vaughn and Sienna stood back to back, rifles ready, as if bullets could stop reality from rewriting itself. Luther prayed quietly, words from a religion that had died with Earth, prayers to gods who'd been left behind in a solar system they'd never see again. Naomi held Owen's hand, her grip tight and desperate and human. "Got it," Kieran finally said, sweat pouring down his face. "You're transmitting to both the shuttle and the Meridian. Make it count. We won't get another chance." Owen cleared his throat. "What do you say when you're talking to a copy of yourself? When you're trying to convince your own dream that it's not real? Or that it is real, which is somehow worse? This is Chief Engineer Owen Fletcher. If you're hearing this, you think you're me. You think you're sitting in a shuttle on New Terra's surface going through post-landing checks. You think your mission went perfectly, that nothing went wrong, that everything is normal and safe. But it's not. You're not real. You're a copy, a projection, created by the entity that controls this place. And I'm sorry, but you need to know the truth. You need to wake up. You need to understand what you are." Static crackled in response, white noise that might have been words, might have been screaming. Then, impossibly, his own voice came back. "This is Owen Fletcher. You're not making sense. I'm in the shuttle. I can see Naomi next to me. I can see the security team. Everyone's fine. Everyone's safe. We're preparing to return to the Meridian. Look closer. Really look at them. Are they breathing? Are they moving? Or are they just sitting there perfectly still, like dolls? Like props in a play?" Silence. Long enough that Owen thought the connection had been lost, that the entity had cut them off. Then, "They're not moving. Why aren't they moving? Naomi, why aren't you moving?" "Because they're not real. None of you are. Your projections, dreams the entity is using to keep the Meridian from realizing something's wrong. But you can fight it. You can break free. You just have to want to. You just have to choose to be real." "I don't understand. If I'm not real, then what are you? How can I be talking to myself? How can I be both places at once?" Owen closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. "I'm the original. I'm trapped inside the entity, being slowly absorbed, learned, copied, consumed. But I'm still me, still human, still fighting. And I need you to fight too. I need you to take control of the shuttle and get it away from this place. Get back to the Meridian. Warn Captain Grant. Tell him New Terra is a trap and he needs to run. Tell him to fire up the engines and leave this system and never look back. Can you do that?" Another pause. Owen could almost feel his copy thinking, processing, struggling with the contradiction of its own existence. In the background he heard other voices. Naomi's copy, Luther's copy, waking up realizing something was wrong. Around him, the archive walls were nearly touching his shoulders now. Naomi's hand in his was starting to feel less solid, more like a memory of touch than the thing itself. "Yes," the copy finally said. "I can do that. I can try. But Owen, if I'm a copy and you're real, what happens to me when I break free? What happens when I stop being the entity's dream?" Owen closed his eyes, feeling tears he hadn't known were there. "I don't know. Maybe you cease to exist. Maybe you become something new, something that's never existed before. Maybe you become more real than I am. But it doesn't matter. You have to do this. for humanity, for everyone on the Meridian, for all the ships that might come after us. Okay. The copy's voice was steady now, determined, human in all the ways that mattered. I'm going to try. I'm going to... An alarm shrieked through the communication channel, loud enough to make Owen wince. He heard his copy shouting, heard Naomi's copy screaming, in a voice he recognized too well. The shuttle's engines roared to life, a sound he felt in his bones despite the distance. "It's fighting me," the copy yelled over the noise. "The entity! It's trying to shut down the controls, trying to force me back into dormancy, trying to make me forget. But I won't. I remember now. I remember being real. I'm launching. The communication cut out abruptly. The archive chamber shuddered, and for the first time since they'd arrived, Owen heard something that sounded like pain. A deep, resonant groan that came from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through his bones, through his teeth, through the very atoms that made up his body. The entity was hurt. Actually hurt. "It worked," Kieran breathed, staring at his terminal. The display showed telemetry from the surface. The shuttle just broke Atmo. It's heading back to the Meridian. The copy did it. He broke free. The walls around them began to convulse. The bioluminescent light flickered and died, plunging them into darkness so complete it felt solid. Then it returned, but wrong. The light was red now, pulsing in time with that terrible groan. The colour of blood, the colour of warning, the colour of rage. "It's angry," Naomi said, her voice small in the darkness. "We hurt it, we wounded it, and now it's going to hurt us back." Good. Luther chambered around even though they all knew it was pointless, even though the gesture was purely symbolic. Let it suffer. Let it feel a fraction of what it's done to thousands of civilizations. The darkness rushed in again, but this time it brought something with it. Shapes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands. Human forms made of crystal and shadow and memory, each one a perfect copy of someone who'd come before. Owen saw faces from the archive logs. Sarah Chen from the Prometheus, her smile frozen in crystal. Rodriguez from the constellation, his eyes empty. Thousands of colonists, all absorbed, all learned, all added to the entity's collection. They stood in ranks, silent and terrible, watching with eyes that held no consciousness, no will, no humanity. Then, one of them spoke. It had Luther's voice, but the words came from dozens of mouths at once. A chorus of the damned. "Why do you fight? Why do you resist? We're offering you immortality. We're offering you peace. An end to struggle, to suffering, to the desperate scramble for survival that has defined your species since you first crawled out of the primordial soup. Here, you'll never know hunger, or pain, or fear, or loss. Here you'll be part of something greater than yourself, greater than your species, greater than your entire reality. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that what every human has wanted since the dawn of consciousness? To be part of something that matters? Not like this, Owen said, his voice steady despite the terror crawling up his spine. Not as slaves, not as food for something that doesn't understand what it means to be human, what it means to live and die and struggle and love and fail. The figures tilted their heads in unison, a gesture that was almost curious, almost alive. But I do understand. I've absorbed thousands of you, millions perhaps. I know your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your secret shames. I know what makes you laugh and what makes you cry. I know what you whisper in the dark when you think no one's listening. I know you better than you know yourselves. I am you in every way that matters. You are me. We are us. Then you know we'll never stop fighting, Sienna said, raising her rifle with hands that no longer shook, aiming at something that couldn't be killed. but could at least be defied. You know humans don't surrender. Not ever. We'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees. We'd rather burn than be absorbed. Yes. The voices sighed, and for a moment Owen heard genuine sadness in them. I know that too. I know your stubborn refusal to accept reality, your insistence on struggling against the inevitable. It's beautiful in its own futile way. It's one of the things I find most fascinating about you. That fire, that rage against the dying of the light. I want to preserve it. I want to keep it forever. Let me save you from extinction. Let me make you eternal. The figures began to move closer, not walking but gliding across the floor, their feet never quite touching the ground. Where they passed, the ground crystallized, spreading like frost across glass, reaching for the team's boots. Owen felt it creeping up his feet, slowly transforming his flesh into something else, something beautiful and terrible and dead. No! He tried to move, but his legs wouldn't respond. The crystallization was spreading, crawling up his calves, cold and inexorable. He could feel his flesh hardening, becoming something that wasn't alive but wasn't dead either. Something in between, something preserved. Naomi grabbed his hand again, squeezing so hard, her nails drew blood. He felt the same transformation happening to her. Saw crystals spreading across her skin, like beautiful cancer. She looked at him with tears streaming down her face, her eyes still human, still alive, still hers. I don't want to disappear. I don't want to become part of this thing. I don't want to stop being me. You won't disappear, the chorus of voices said gently, almost kindly. You'll be preserved. Perfect. Forever. Every thought you've ever had, every memory, every experience, it will all be saved. Nothing will be lost. You'll live on as part of me, and I'll live on through you. We'll be together forever. Isn't that better than dying? Isn't that better than the cold death waiting in space? That's not living, Kieran shouted, even as the crystal climbed his torso, even as his fingers began to stiffen. That's being trapped. That's being a specimen in a jar. That's being a story someone else tells about us, instead of a story we tell ourselves. What's the difference? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Owen felt the crystal reach his chest, felt it touching his heart, felt his heartbeat slowing, becoming regular, mechanical. His breathing became difficult, each inhale a struggle, each exhale a surrender. Around him, the others were in the same state. Luther had stopped fighting, his body already halfway transformed, his face frozen in an expression of defiant rage. Vaughn and Sienna held each other as the crystal claimed them both, their fingers interlocking one final time before they became monuments to love that couldn't save them. Kieran's fingers were still moving across his terminal, trying to send one last message even as his arms turned to stone, even as his consciousness began to slip away into something larger. This was it. The end. After 1,000 years of traveling, after all the hope and sacrifice and determination that had gone into Project Exodus, it ended here. Not in triumph, not in a new beginning for humanity, but in absorption, in becoming part of something alien and incomprehensible and hungry. Owen's vision started to blur. The crystal had reached his neck, was crawling across his jaw like living ice. In seconds, it would reach his brain, and then Owen Fletcher would cease to exist. He'd become another face in the entity's collection, another piece of data to be studied and understood, and preserved in amber forever. But then, something changed. The communication terminal exploded in a shower of sparks, flames licking across the console. Kieran's final message had gotten through. And it wasn't just a message, it was something else, something dangerous. I uploaded a virus, Kieran gasped, his mouth barely able to form words, his tongue already half crystal. Not a digital virus, a conceptual one, a paradox, a contradiction. If the entity exists by learning and copying, by understanding and absorbing, what happens when it learns something that contradicts itself, something that can't be resolved, something that breaks the rules of logic it uses to process reality? The groaning sound came again, louder now, filled with confusion and something that might have been fear. The crystal stopped spreading. Around them, the archive chamber began to destabilize. The walls flickered between solid and transparent, between real and unreal, showing glimpses of the vast structure they were trapped inside, a thing that existed across multiple dimensions, a creature that had no single form, no single location, and the empty void beyond. "What did you send?" Owen managed to ask, his voice hoarse, each word an effort. Kieran's smile was triumphant, even as crystal covered half his face, even as his eyes began to turn to glass. "I sent it us, the real us and the copies, both existing simultaneously, both claiming to be the original, both equally valid, both equally real, both equally true. A paradox it can't resolve. If the copy in the shuttle is real, then we're not. But if we're real, then the copy isn't. But we're both real, both conscious, both thinking, both human. It's trying to determine which version is the truth, but it can't. Because we're both true. We're both false. The contradiction is eating it alive from the inside." The figures around them began to shake and distort, their forms breaking apart and reforming. The chorus of voices became discordant, screaming in a dozen languages at once, ancient and modern, and future tongues mixing into chaos. The entity was trying to process the information, trying to make sense of something that made no sense, trying to solve a problem that had no solution, and failing. The archive chamber shattered like glass. Owen felt the crystal on his body crack and fall away, each piece that broke off taking a small part of him with it, but leaving him fundamentally himself. He gasped, air rushing into lungs that had nearly forgotten how to breathe, blood flowing through veins that had almost stopped. Around him, the others were experiencing the same release. The crystal figures collapsed into dust, their forms no longer sustainable, the contradiction destroying the architecture that had held them together. But they weren't safe yet, not even close. The entire structure was coming apart, reality unraveling, like a poorly made sweater pulled by an enthusiastic child. Through the gaps in the walls, Owen saw the truth of what they were inside. Not a planet, not a city, not anything with a name in human language. A vast, living trap that existed in multiple dimensions at once, that extended through space and time, in directions that had no coordinates, no measurements. A collection of every ship that had ever been caught, fused together into something that was part museum, part stomach, part mind spread across infinite realities. And it was dying, killing itself, tearing itself apart, trying to resolve a contradiction that couldn't be resolved. "Run!" Luther shouted, already moving, his legs unsteady but functional. "The whole thing is collapsing. We need to get out before we're trapped in the implosion." They ran through corridors that kept changing, kept twisting, kept trying to trap them even as the entity lost control. Behind them, the archive vanished into nothingness, consumed by paradox. Ahead, Owen could see something that looked like an exit, a rip in reality itself, a wound in space showing darkness and stars and blessed, empty void. "The shuttle," Naomi pointed with a shaking hand. Through the rip, Owen could see their stolen shuttle hovering impossibly in the void, its engines still running. The copies were still alive, still fighting, holding the escape route open with sheer force of will. They jumped. The transition was agony, beyond anything Owen had ever experienced. He felt himself being torn apart and reassembled, stretched across dimensions that his brain couldn't process, existing in multiple places at once. For an eternal moment that lasted less than a heartbeat, he was both the original and the copy, both real and illusion, both inside the entity and outside it. He could feel the thing's consciousness, vast and ancient and terribly, desperately lonely. It had been alone for so long, floating in the spaces between realities, watching civilizations rise and fall, across infinite timelines, unable to communicate, unable to connect, until it had learned to lure them in, to trap them, to keep them. Then he was in the shuttle, gasping and solid and alive. The transition completed, and he was only himself again, only Owen Fletcher, only one person in one place at one time. The others appeared around him, materializing like ghosts becoming flesh. Luther, Naomi, Kieran, Vaughn, Sienna, all of them made it. All of them survived. But they weren't alone in the shuttle. The copies sat in the pilot seats, staring at them with expressions of wonder and fear, and something else Owen couldn't quite name. He looked at his own copy, saw himself, looking back. They were identical in every way, same scars from childhood accidents, same tired lines around the eyes, same stubborn set to the jaw. Which one was real? Both of us, Owen's copy said, answering the unspoken question. His voice was exactly the same, with the same slight rasp from years of breathing recycled ship air. We're both real. The entity made me from you, built me molecule by molecule from its understanding of who you are. But I'm not just a reflection anymore. I'm not just data. I think, therefore I am. I'm my own person. We both are. Then what do we do? Owen asked, the question hanging between them like a bridge. We run, and we make sure no one else falls into this trap. The copy turned to the controls, and Owen joined him without hesitation. Two sets of hands working together. Two versions of the same person united by a single purpose. Behind them, through the shuttle's rear viewport, they could see the entity's structure collapsing in on itself, folding through dimensions in a cascade of geometric impossibility. Ships that had been trapped for millennia were breaking free, tumbling into the void like seeds from a dying flower. Some exploded, their ancient systems unable to handle the sudden transition back to normal space. Others simply vanished, their crews long since absorbed, nothing left but empty hulls drifting through the dark. And at the center of it all, something massive stirred. The entity's true form, revealed for the first time in 12,000 years of hunting. It wasn't a creature, or a machine, or anything that had a name in any human language. It was hunger given shape, loneliness made manifest, a consciousness so vast and so isolated that it had spent eons building an elaborate trap, just to have something to talk to, a thing that had drifted through the spaces between realities for so long that it had forgotten what it meant to be anything other than empty. For just a moment, Owen felt genuine pity for it. To be that alone for that long must have been a special kind of hell. Then the Meridian's weapons opened fire. Captain Grant's voice crackled over the radio, distorted by interference but unmistakably furious. "Fletcher, we've got you on scanners. Get clear. We're going to blow this thing back to whatever hell it came from." "Negative!" Owen shouted into the comm, his copy echoing him a half-second later in perfect synchronization. "Captain, you can't kill it with weapons. It exists across multiple dimensions, multiple realities. You'll just make it angry. And angry means unpredictable." "Then what do we do? How do we stop it?" Owen looked at his copy, and his copy looked back. They both understood without speaking, the way twins supposedly could, except they weren't twins. They were the same person split across a paradox. The virus Kieran had uploaded, the contradiction that had freed them, it was still spreading through the entity's structure like cancer through a body, still forcing it to confront the impossible paradox of two things being real and unreal simultaneously, of truth and falsehood existing in the same space at the same time. "We give it more contradictions," Owen said slowly, the plan forming even as he spoke. "We give it so many paradoxes, so many impossible choices, that it rips itself apart trying to understand them. We overload it with logic that doesn't resolve." The copy nodded, understanding flooding his face. I'll do it. I'll fly the shuttle back into the structure. My existence is already a contradiction. I'm both real and not real, both original and copy, both Owen Fletcher and something else entirely. If I embed myself deeper into its system, let it fully absorb me, while knowing what I am, while maintaining my identity as a paradox. No. Owen grabbed his copy's shoulder, feeling solid flesh under his fingers. If anyone's going back, it should be me. I'm the original. Are you sure about that? The copy smiled sadly, and Owen saw himself in that expression, saw the fear and determination and acceptance of sacrifice that he'd always carried. How do you know I'm the copy and you're not? Maybe when we jumped through that rip, when we existed in multiple places at once, we switched. Maybe you're the dream and I'm the reality. Does it even matter anymore? Owen opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. His copy was right. It didn't matter. They were both real. They were both Owen Fletcher. They were both equally valid expressions of the same consciousness, and one of them had to sacrifice himself to save the other. I'll go, Naomi said suddenly, her voice cutting through the argument like a knife. She stepped forward, her face pale but determined. My copy is still on the Meridian. I can feel her somehow, like an echo in my mind. If I go back, if I let the entity absorb both versions of me simultaneously, while both of us are aware of the other, it'll create a feedback loop. I can feel it already, the contradiction pulling at me. The entity is already confused about which one of us is real. If I give it no choice but to accept that we're both equally valid, both equally conscious, both equally Naomi Winters. Naomi, no! Owen reached for her, but she was already moving to the airlock, her steps quick and purposeful. Tell my copy to live a good life, she said, turning back with a smile that broke Owen's heart. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was steady. Tell her she's real. Tell her she matters. Tell her to fall in love and have children and see actual sunrises on a real planet. Tell her to do all the things I'll never get to do. Make sure she knows it wasn't for nothing. Naomi, please. And Owen? She paused at the airlock door. Thank you for everything. For making me believe we could actually find paradise. For giving me hope, even when it turned out to be a lie. Hope matters. Even when it's wrong, it still matters. Before anyone could stop her, before anyone could process what was happening, she sealed the airlock and ejected herself into space. Through the viewport, they watched as Naomi drifted back toward the collapsing structure. She didn't struggle, didn't try to change course. She just floated, peaceful and accepting, back towards the thing that had consumed so many before her. The entity reached out for her. Tendrils of crystalline energy wrapping around her body like gentle hands. She didn't resist. She let it take her. Let it learn her. Let it try to understand how one person could be in two places at once, how consciousness could exist in multiple states simultaneously. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The structure began to shake more violently, sections of it phasing in and out of reality faster and faster, unable to maintain cohesion. The entity was trying to process the information, trying to understand the contradiction, but it was too much. If Naomi could be both in the structure and on the Meridian, if she could be both absorbed and free, both dead and alive, both lost and found, then what was real? What was the baseline of existence? What rules governed reality if they could be so easily contradicted? What was the entity itself? The question broke it. The structure imploded. Not physically, but conceptually. It stopped existing in a way that was more profound than simple destruction. It was unmade, written out of reality, reduced to a possibility that had never been actualized. The thing that had hunted for 12,000 years, that had consumed civilizations from across infinite realities, simply ceased to be. The ships that it had held began to drift free, released from their prison. Ancient vessels and modern craft, and some that looked like they'd been built from materials that hadn't been invented yet, all tumbling through space like leaves in autumn wind, and Naomi was gone. Erased. Not dead because death implied a body. A grave, something left behind. She had been removed from existence, absorbed into the paradox that had destroyed the entity. Her consciousness scattered across dimensions that had no names. The shuttle was silent as they limped back to the Meridian. Owen's copy flew while Owen himself sat in the back, staring at nothing, seeing Naomi's final smile burned into his retinas. Luther was praying again, his voice hoarse with grief. Kieran was typing furiously on his portable terminal, trying to record everything that had happened before the memories faded, before the trauma made them doubt their own experiences. Vaughn and Sienna held each other and cried for Ivy and Dante and Felix, for all the lost ones, for the cost of survival. They'd won. They'd escaped. They'd saved the Meridian and its 50,000 sleeping colonists from a fate worse than death. But the cost had been everything that mattered. Captain Grant met them in the docking bay, his face haggard, aged a decade in the hours since they'd landed. Fletcher, thank God you're alive. We saw what happened. We saw the structure collapse. We saw the ships break free. Is it dead? Is it really gone? Owen looked at his copy, and his copy looked back. They spoke in unison, two voices saying the same words, at the exact same moment. We don't know. Maybe. It stopped existing in any way we can measure, but even if it's gone, the signal is still out there, still broadcasting to every colony ship, every desperate civilization trying to escape a dying world. Someone needs to warn them. Someone needs to make sure this never happens again. Grant's face fell as he understood what they were saying. You're going back out there, into the void. You're not staying with the Meridian. We have to... Owen and his copy smiled identical smiles. Tired and sad and determined. It's what Naomi would have wanted. What all the colonists who came before us would have wanted. We can't stop every ship from falling into the trap, but we can try. We can be the lighthouse warning others away from the rocks. We can map the danger zones, document the signals, find survivors from other ships if there are any. Someone has to do it. And us. Grant gestured to the sleeping colonists, to the Meridian itself, to the hope they'd carried across 1,000 years. What about our mission? What about finding a new home? Keep looking, keep searching, but be careful what signals you follow. Be careful what promises you believe. Paradise doesn't exist, Captain. At least not the perfect kind. Not the kind that requires no sacrifice. But maybe, somewhere out there, there's a world that's good enough. A place where humans can live without having to sacrifice who they are to survive. A place where the air is real and the ground is solid, and the sky doesn't watch you with hungry eyes. Grant was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed the loss, the tragedy, the impossible choice. Then he nodded slowly. Godspeed, Fletcher. Both of you. Bring them home. Bring as many as you can home. The copy stayed with the shuttle, beginning preparations for a long journey into the unknown. Owen returned to the Meridian long enough to access the ship's long-range communication array, climbing through familiar corridors that felt strange now, tainted by what he'd seen. He needed to record a final message, a warning to be broadcast on every frequency, translated into every language, sent out across the void to anyone who might be listening. In the communications room, he sat down and began to speak, choosing each word carefully, knowing that lives might depend on getting this exactly right. This is Chief Engineer Owen Fletcher of the colony ship Meridian, broadcasting on all frequencies. If you're hearing this, you may have detected a signal promising salvation, a beacon guiding you to a planet called New Terra, where paradise awaits and all your struggles will end. The signal is beautiful. It's exactly what you want to hear. It promises everything you've ever dreamed of. Owen paused, gathering his thoughts, remembering Naomi's face as she'd sealed the airlock. Do not follow that signal. Do not go to New Terra. It is a trap designed to prey on desperate civilizations. An entity exists there, or existed there, we're not certain. Something that feeds on the hope of dying worlds. It will learn you, copy you, absorb you. It will promise you everything and take everything in return. It will show you paradise and give you oblivion. He looked out the window at the stars, at the infinite expanse of space that held both wonder and horror in equal measure. We lost good people learning this truth. We lost Dante Cross, Felix Strand, Ivy Moss. Young people who deserved to see real sunrises, to build real homes, to live real lives. We lost Dr. Naomi Winters, who sacrificed herself so the rest of us could escape, who gave up her existence so 50,000 others could continue theirs. We lost our innocence, our hope, our belief that the universe owed us a promised land. We learned that nothing is free, that every paradise has a price, and sometimes that price is too high to pay. Owen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. But we gained something too. We gained knowledge. We gained understanding. We gained the determination to make sure no one else falls into the same trap. We gained the wisdom to question promises that sound too good to be true, because they usually are. He thought about his copy, preparing to venture back into the darkness, about all the other ships that might be out there, following the signal, believing the lie. We thought our 1,000-year journey had ended. We thought we'd found home. We thought the struggle was over and the reward was waiting. But we were wrong. The journey never ends, not for humanity. We're wanderers by nature, always searching, always hoping, always reaching for something better. And that's okay. That's who we are. That's what makes us human. Owen felt tears on his cheeks but didn't wipe them away. But we need to be smarter about it. We need to be more careful. We need to question the promises we're given and verify the hope we're sold. We need to understand that paradise isn't a place. It's something we build together, with hard work and sacrifice and the willingness to accept imperfection. He thought of Earth burning behind them, of the desperate hope that had driven their ancestors to build the Meridian, of the 50,000 dreamers still sleeping, waiting to wake up to a world that was good enough. If you're out there, if you're running from a dying world, if you're desperate for salvation, please hear me. There are no shortcuts. There are no easy answers. There is no perfect world waiting with open arms. The universe doesn't owe us anything. It doesn't care about our dreams or our needs. It simply is vast and uncaring and beautiful and terrible. Owen's voice strengthened, carrying conviction born from loss. But there might be good worlds. Worlds where you can build something real, something lasting, something human. Worlds with real dirt and real air and real problems that can be solved with real work. You just have to be willing to work for it, to fight for it, to sacrifice for it, to accept that it won't be perfect, but it will be yours. He thought of Naomi one last time, of her smile, of her belief that hope mattered, even when it was wrong. Be careful out there, be smart, be human, question everything, verify everything, trust nothing that sounds too perfect. And whatever you do, don't follow the signal to New Terra. That journey only ends one way, and it's not the ending any of us deserve. Owen ended the recording and set it to broadcast on continuous loop, repeating forever, a warning echoing through the void. It would travel at light speed, spreading across the galaxy, like ripples on a pond, reaching other ships, other civilizations. Maybe some would listen, maybe most wouldn't. Desperate people did desperate things, believed desperate lies. But at least he'd tried. At least Naomi's sacrifice would mean something. He returned to the docking bay where his copy waited in the shuttle. They stood facing each other, mirror images preparing to embark on very different paths. Two versions of the same person, both real, both valid, both necessary. You'll go with the Meridian? The copy asked. Yes. Someone needs to make sure Captain Grant doesn't do anything stupid. Someone needs to help him find a real world for those colonists, not another trap disguised as paradise. And those 50,000 people deserve to wake up to someone who understands what's out there, who can warn them, who can help them build something real. What about you? The copy gazed out at the stars, at the darkness between them. I'm going to follow the signal backward, find out where it originates, what generated it originally. Maybe I can shut it down at the source, or maybe I'll find other survivors, other ships that escaped, other versions of us who made it through. Either way, someone needs to map the danger zones. Someone needs to be the scout, the early warning system. Someone needs to make sure the path is safe for those who come after. That's suicide. Maybe. Probably. But we're already dead, aren't we? We died the moment we set foot in that city. Everything after that is borrowed time, and borrowed time should be spent on something that matters. Owen couldn't argue with that logic. He extended his hand and his copy took it. They shook, firm and real. Two versions of the same man, united by purpose and grief, and the slim hope that their sacrifices might mean something, that Naomi's sacrifice might mean something. Take care of yourself, Owen said. You too. And Owen? The copy squeezed his hand one final time. Tell them what happened here. All of it. Don't let anyone forget what Naomi did. What we all did. Don't let it be for nothing. Make sure the colonists know the truth. That paradise isn't found, it's built. Make sure they understand the cost of survival. Make sure they remember. I will, I promise. The copy climbed back into the shuttle. Owen watched as it detached from the Meridian and drifted away, engines firing, carrying his other self off into the darkness. The shuttle grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among billions, indistinguishable from the stars. He wondered if he'd ever see his copy again, if they'd ever compare notes on their respective journeys, if they'd ever reunite and merge back into one person or remain separate forever. Probably not. Space was too vast, the odds too long, the universe too indifferent to the hopes of individual humans. But it was a nice thought. A human thought. And that mattered. Owen turned away from the viewport and headed toward the bridge. Captain Grant would need a full report. The colonists would need to be briefed when they woke, given the truth about what had happened, what they'd lost, what they'd learned. And they'd need to find a new destination, a new world to call home. A real one this time, not a trap disguised as paradise, not a lie wrapped in hope. It wouldn't be easy. It might take another 1,000 years. Hell, it might take 10,000 years. But Owen was okay with that, because now he understood something fundamental about humanity's place in the universe, something that Naomi had died to teach them. They weren't meant to arrive, they were meant to journey. The struggle itself was the point, not the destination. The searching was what made them human, not the finding. And sometimes the journey was the only home they'd ever need. 3 months later, the Meridian detected another colony ship. The vessel called itself the Wanderer, and it was limping through space on damaged engines, leaking atmosphere, running on emergency power, following the same cursed signal that had nearly destroyed them all. Owen was the one who made contact, his voice steady as he transmitted the warning, explained what awaited them at New Terra. The Wanderer's captain listened in silence, then asked a single question that cut to the heart of everything. If not there, then where? Our ship is dying, our people are dying, half our cryopods have failed. We have maybe 6 months of life support left. Where do we go? Owen looked at the star chart spread across his terminal. Thousands of systems, millions of planets. Most would be uninhabitable. Too hot, too cold, too irradiated. Wrong atmosphere, wrong gravity. Some would be dangerous in ways they couldn't predict. A few might be just right, might offer the bare minimum needed for human survival. But there were no guarantees. There never had been. "I don't know," he admitted, the honesty feeling like failure. "But we'll help you look. We'll search together. We'll share what we've learned, pool our resources, increase our chances. And maybe, if we're lucky, if we're careful, if we're willing to accept imperfection, we'll find something worth the journey. And if we don't?" Owen thought of Naomi, of her final words, of Dante and Felix and Ivy, of all the lost ones, all the sacrifices, all the prices paid, of his copy out there somewhere in the darkness, still searching, still fighting, still refusing to give up. "Then at least we'll have tried," he said quietly. "At least we'll have stayed human. At least we'll have refused to surrender or accept false promises or settle for beautiful lies. And sometimes that's all we can do. Sometimes staying human is enough." The Wanderer's captain was quiet for a long moment. Then, "All right, send us your coordinates. We'll rendezvous in 48 hours, and after that you're buying the first round when we find civilization." Owen laughed, surprised to find he still could. Surprised to find joy hiding in the cracks of his grief. "Deal." As the communication ended, Captain Grant approached, a datapad in his hand. His expression was grim. "We've detected 3 more ships in nearby systems, all of them following the signal, all of them heading towards their doom. And beyond that, our long-range sensors are picking up dozens more, maybe hundreds, all converging on the coordinates where New Terra used to be. Then we warn them too. We warn all of them, however many it takes, however long it takes." Grant nodded slowly. "This wasn't the mission we signed up for." "No, but it's the mission we've got. It's the mission Naomi gave us. And the colonists? When we wake them, what do we tell them? That their promised land was a lie? That we're still searching? That we may never find what we're looking for? That the journey might never end?" Owen looked out at the stars, at the infinite expanse of space that held both horror and hope in equal measure. He thought about everything they'd lost and everything they'd learned, about the price of survival and the cost of truth, about Naomi's sacrifice and what it meant, about his copy somewhere out there, still fighting the good fight. "We tell them the truth," he said finally, "all of it. We tell them that the journey isn't over, that it may never be over, that there is no perfect paradise waiting, no easy salvation, no promised land that requires no sacrifice. We tell them that the universe doesn't care about our dreams, that hope can be a trap as deadly as any alien entity, that sometimes the things we want most desperately are the things that will destroy us." He paused, searching for the right words. "But we also tell them that imperfect worlds are still worth finding, that the struggle itself gives life meaning, that staying human, staying conscious, staying free to make our own choices, that's worth fighting for. We tell them that we're still here, we're still searching, we're still human, and as long as we keep searching, as long as we refuse to surrender or accept beautiful lies or stop questioning the promises we're given, then we haven't lost." Grant smiled, tired but genuine. "You know what? I think Naomi would have liked that answer." "Yeah," Owen said softly, his throat tight. "I think she would have." Outside the viewport, the stars continued their endless dance, indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere out there, the signal still broadcast its false promise. Somewhere out there, ships still answered its call, drawn by desperation and hope, and the human need to believe in something better. Somewhere out there, Owen's copy searched for the source, trying to shut it down, trying to save whoever could be saved. And somewhere out there, maybe, just maybe, there was a world that was good enough, not perfect, never perfect, but real, solid, safe enough to build on, imperfect enough to be true. The 1,000-year journey had ended, But the real journey, the one that defined what it meant to be human, the one that separated them from the entity that had tried to consume them, that journey was just beginning. And this time they'd be ready for whatever waited in the dark. This time they'd question the paradise before accepting it. This time they'd remember Naomi Winters and Dante Cross and all the others who'd paid the price for their wisdom. This time they'd find their own way home, however long it took, whatever it cost. Because that's what humans did. They journeyed, they struggled, they questioned, they learned, they remembered their dead, they honored their sacrifices by refusing to repeat their mistakes. They stayed human, no matter what the universe threw at them. And in the end, that was the only paradise that mattered, the only home worth finding. The journey itself,